from the outside, people say, oh, she's made it. But from the inside, it was a completely different story. I felt very disconnected. And I'm not saying that my career didn't resonate or wasn't what I wanted from the beginning. I grew up with a love of luxury and fashion. That was my ultimate goal. But I think that what happens, even if it's right for us in the beginning of our career or mid-career, we evolve, right? We evolve as people and we change, and different things become important to us later in life. So it's okay to explore what some type of pivot would look like.
You're listening to Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. Today, I'm joined by Melissa Hidrobo, who spent 20 years in luxury boutique retail, building a career that looked like success from the outside, until burnout dismantled the identity underneath it all. Melissa now helps high achievers recognize the warning signs before they hit that breaking point. If you've been pushing through, ignoring every signal because stopping to you feels like failure, then this episode is for you. Melissa, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Eugene. I'm so happy to be here.
Melissa, I want to get straight into it. You spent 20 years building your career in the fashion industry, right? And everything, as you said, looked like success from the outside. You had the title, the career, the lifestyle. But you said that inside you still felt like you were running on empty. When was the moment that you first noticed that there was a gap?
I would say that over my 20-year luxury retail career, it was an accumulation of moments. I started my luxury retail career, as I said, 20 years ago, about 2005, back with Louis Vuitton. I always worked in Miami. And I began to see the very demanding schedule that I would have. Especially in the US with the mall hours that we have, a lot of the malls open up at 10 in the morning, they close at 9 p.m. at night. And as employees, we still have to be in the boutique before and after doing opening and closing procedures. Most clients shopped holidays, nights, like evenings and weekends. So over time, I was missing out. I was living in Miami, far away from my mom's side of the family in Connecticut, my dad's side of the family in Ecuador. I stopped celebrating holidays because I couldn't take vacation time during then. I worked a lot of late nights and I worked a lot of weekends. So I was really losing my life. And then fast forward to when I was in the last 5 years of my career, I was in a very demanding position, working in a very high volume store. And during the day, you're on the sales floor, you're with your team, you're with clients, and bringing home your work in the evening hours to work sometimes until midnight and on your time off as well. So I would say that was the beginning of me realizing that or questioning how much longer do I want to live this life?
And what were those signals that you realized that is no longer working for me? What were the early signals that you started to recognize? And sometimes they've been going on for a while, but it takes a while before we actually recognize what they are.
Absolutely. That's such an excellent question. And I don't even know if I recognized it in the beginning as what we call burnout, right? So I was, first of all, giving everything of myself to my career, my team, my clients. I would always put myself last, even if that meant forcing myself to get out of bed and going to work and working sick, right? When we're feeling sick, not taking a sick day. Or at that times where we would have to stay home and take a sick day, working from home. This is something that's not normal. We as humans need to rest. I would say the foggy mind, not being able to concentrate. And something very specific that came up for me was that I was starting to have these fantasies. I was living one life, but I was fantasizing that I just want to like get into my car and start driving on an open road with destination nowhere and just seeing what would unfold. So I started having these fantasies of escaping and of what a different life could look like. So I would say that that's more than just burnout. I would say that that's a complete misalignment of a life that I was living versus where I really wanted to be.
When you mentioned that, what's it called? Is it Thelma and Louise? What was that? It just
Yes.
reminds me of that scene. And I'm like, is
Yes.
that the fantasy you have of just driving off into nowhere?
That was exactly it, Eugene. And it felt so good, but then I would have to snap out of it and get back to reality.
And when you said that, let's like when you were putting yourself first, or sorry, putting yourself last, was it that you were telling yourself it was your vocation or your calling, or this was always what you wanted to do? What the driving force behind you putting everyone else before yourself?
I think it was, especially in the US, I think that our careers are our identity. And in order to be considered devoted or dedicated, right? Dedicated to our career so that our bosses see that we're performing, so that we get considered for a promotion, so that we could grow. We consider our careers part of our identity and our success. So when you have a very demanding career, you're putting that first so that people see you as dedicated, that people that will see you as worthy, whether they're people that you work with or people in your life. I guess it gives us like a certain status in a way.
I think that's the way that the schooling system is built, that it conditions us that we must work in a certain way to achieve a certain title. And once we achieve that title, we need to either maintain that or only go up the career ladder over the next 40 or 50 years so that we can
Exactly.
finally enjoy our retirement.
Exactly. Because from the outside, it looks like we have it all. It looks like we're successful. We attained what we worked so hard for, what we studied for, what we planned for. So there's a disconnect between the way that we're seen on paper or on the outside, the way that people perceive us. For example, in my case, it looked like a very glamorous lifestyle. I had the Miami lifestyle and an amazing ocean or a bay view, going to fancy restaurants. And in my case, I was wearing a lot of luxury items. So from the outside, people say, "Oh, she's made it." But from the inside, it was a completely different story. I felt very disconnected. And I'm not saying that my career didn't resonate or wasn't what I wanted from the beginning. I grew up with a love of luxury and fashion. That was my ultimate goal. But I think that what happens, even if it's right for us in the beginning of our career or mid-career, we evolve, right? We evolve as people and we change, and different things become important to us later in life. So it's okay to explore what some type of pivot would look like.
Even for me, it was when I burnt out and I realized, look, it's not the work that burnt me out. It was my relationship with the work that burnt me out. And again, attaching my identity to what I did. And then it was when I had that realization that the me that started working here 10 years ago had very different values and expectations than the me that's working now. And what I had to do was make that decision of, do I just want to stay put and stay comfortable and suck it up, even though it's no longer where I want to be because I recognize I have changed? Or do I take ownership of that and embrace the uncertainty of, I don't know where this is going to take me, but I'm curious and I want to find out. And I may not have the security of staying put, but I have to accept that risk if I want to see what else is out there.
You brought up so many important points and a lot of fears that people navigate when they're thinking about some type of change, like a career change. You talk about identity and about risk. And actually, that's something that I work with my clients on. That's actually the first thing that I work on is who am I beyond the title? What are my core values? Because a lot of times we don't take the time just to sit down and think about what's important to us, right? So we define about 3 to 5, and then whenever we make decisions going forward, we check in with those core values to make sure that it's aligned with what's important to us. And one of my favorite questions is, what was my definition of success before? And what is my new definition of success? So a lot of the points that you bring up, I hear from so many different people, and they're very valid. And a lot of times in a career transition, people were just think about tweaking their resume, their LinkedIn profile, and where can I apply next? But it's if you want to have a great, successful, fulfilling next chapter, it's so important first to do the identity work. We never give space for ourselves for that.
I love that, especially because, like, and I'll give another example of myself. is that when I stepped out of my last job, after realizing that it was no longer congruent with what I valued now, and I made that step, I said, look, I'm doing this because I want to do justice to myself, and I also want to do justice to the company. Because
Mm,
if I am going to stay here and I'm going to resent that I didn't move on, then I'm going to
mhm,
show up differently. I'm not going to show up the way I want to. But I'm also denying someone who's coming straight out of university who would love this position to get 10 years of experience or more, where I'm feeling resentful in a way. I'm denying them that opportunity if I don't open up that position. So it was by reframing it that way. And also, what was the other point? You mentioned the way that people want to, let's say, avoid the risk or let's say, the jumping straight from one job into the next. I made myself take a 3 month gap between leaving that job and starting anything new because I had to realize I had to reflect on why was I jumping into the next job? Was it just so that I would feel secure, that I felt the structure, the identity of being a hard worker, or was it something that I was comfortable in myself? And by
mhm.
taking that gap in between, and by giving myself the safety buffer as well to say that I am comfortable, that I can live with less. I can live by whatever means necessary it will take me for the next 3 or 6 months or however to find the job that I would like to work in. And if I found myself getting tight on money, I'd be like, well, I know for next time, whatever job I jump into, I want to make sure I have that safety buffer so I never feel this like on edge or insecure or unstable in what I do ever again. So that's where I always recommend people before they jump from job to job is that they have that stability. So they're not jumping into a job just because they feel insecure, that they're actually pursuing what they want to achieve and that they don't feel like they're stuck in a place just because it's paying the bills.
I think that's such great advice. And you especially had a very deep thought process and a very generous one as well when you were talking about, I no longer want to be here. And if I just stay, I'm taking a space away from a new graduate who really has that passion. So I think that's very generous and very cerebral, right? And you had mentioned also setting some type of foundation, taking those 3 months. I know that in my case, and a lot of people that I've worked with in the past, in 3 months, we were just starting to figure out or thinking about what could come next. Because when somebody's in such deep burnout, and especially you're always like in my job, and when I've spoken to others as well in my industry, in my former luxury retail industry, we're always in fight or flight mode. The first thing we do when we wake up is check our phones to see if a team member has called out, if we need to have additional coverage, if a client has been waiting for us to get back to them. There's always something going on. And it's the last thing we do at night as well. So it's always fight or flight mode. And I remember when I left my job, my adrenaline was still going. And a lot of people that I spoke with, it took them like about a year to a year and a half to really reset their nervous system. Everybody has to give themselves the time that they need, whether it be for how long you can work that out financially or how long it's going to take to recuperate from your last burnout or nervous system. But I love the questions that your own thought process and what you asked yourself to get that financial foundation together. That we didn't talk about the financial foundation, which you brought up. That was a big part of my exit because when I decided that I wanted to leave my career, I wouldn't have been able to do it that second because my financial foundation wasn't in place. And that's one of the things that I worked on immediately. And so that when the time came, I was able to leave without any financial concerns. So that's usually a big fear that comes up for people as well.
And one of the parts, well, my partner hated me, well, didn't hate me, but she was concerned for me at the time when I had set up my foundation and I said, look, if it goes beyond 3 months, I'm going to have to sell my car. And then
Mhm.
in the end, I ended up selling my car anyway because
Mm.
I found I was moving abroad to a job. But she was afraid that if I sell the car, then I'm going backwards because I had what other people would call the status, that I had the house, the white picket fence, the car, the fancy car, and they were all the success metrics in other people's eyes, but not in mine. So when I sold the car, I felt the relief of like, I don't need to worry about taking care of that. I don't need to worry about maintenance or anything anymore. And that was a big step. I was like, if I can never have to own a car again, I'll do it. If I could rely on public transport, I would do it. Um, but for some people, they need to have the success metrics of I need to have the house, I need to have the car, I need to have this job title to give them, as we said, that identity of the success metrics that everyone sets them up for. And then I'm stable. Then I can be happy.
Absolutely. And I feel like, especially in the industry that I came from, we love beautiful things and we love nice things. And a lot of, especially in the US and especially in Miami, where I was based out of, showing that you've made it, right? And it's through those material items, through certain clothing, through certain cars. And that is important to some people, and I respect that. There's people who might want to go into a next chapter and still want to have that, and that's fine. And there's others who are fine modifying that part of their life. So it just depends. But what I hear from your share is when we're navigating a change and we want to make a pivot, very often, we don't only have our own fears, we have to deal with the fears of those closest to us. As you said, a partner, parents who are concerned for us. So that's a very big part of navigating the in-between from when you're ready to leave one life behind and go into a new one. It's having those important conversations, helping minimize the fears that our partners or families might have. And for me, that's about having those deep conversations, being very transparent, and including them in the process, which can help minimize those fears and not make them feel excluded or that they're in the dark.
Yeah, especially as you said, going through those transitions, it's one thing for us to accept, okay, I'm going to try something new, but it's going to be difficult for us to pursue something new if we don't have the support. And if someone else is comfortable with the old version of you, they might fight for you to say, oh, you're changing too much, or you're not the same person you used to be. And that can make it even more difficult for you to go through that change because it becomes like an identity crisis in a way where you're saying, well, the way that I was working the past 10 years served me then, but it's no longer serving me anymore. I'm exhausted. I have no joy in what I do. I feel numb to the world around me. Something has to change. But for the people around us, they don't see that initially. They don't see you falling apart unless you share. And for a lot of us, we don't tend to share those things because on the outside, everything looks great. And I even had a recent guest who said that they didn't share anything because they did not want to be seen as being bragging or seeking validation when
Mm.
what they were really looking for was support, but they were afraid of looking weak, even though they wanted support. So that was a big step for them. So it's trying to have a support network to normalize how you're feeling. And when you're going through a change, you need someone who's going to at least guide you through the small steps of that change and how to have those conversations with the people closest to you when they feel the fear or the insecurity creeping in that, oh, Eugene's not acting the same way he used to, or Melissa is trying something completely different. I wonder what's wrong with her. Maybe she's having a crisis. Maybe I need to jump in and stop her. When that change may be the step that you need to take to go in the right direction towards rediscovering yourself.
Absolutely. And you say two things there that really stand out. One of them was you kept on mentioning the word support, right? And one of the things that I did that was instrumental to this change was what I call I built my personal board of directors. So who was on that board? Mentioned that I needed to get my financial foundation together if I wanted to be serious about making a pivot. So I hired a financial advisor who was probably one of the people who was most instrumental in me being able to leave my career when I wanted to, which was pretty much I made the decision and within a week I put in my resignation. I actually got myself a psychologist because I already knew that I wanted to work in life coaching, some type of coaching. And I said, okay, if I'm going to help others, I need to become the best version of myself first. I have to work on myself. I got a Pilates instructor. I never was one to do much exercise, but I realized that I needed to work on my body, mind, and spirit. And sometimes going to Pilates helped my mind even more than it did my body when I was going through transition. I also had on my board of directors family and friends who understood the change that I needed and who were very supportive. So, getting together a board of directors that will help you depending on what your needs are, especially if you're having challenges at home with your partner not understanding or your family not understanding, is really instrumental and vital in order to support you through a change.
Who else would you have on the board of directors?
So for example, now I see the value of it, and before I didn't understand it. I never understood when I was not a coach the value of a coach. And if I understood at that time what a coach helps one do, I would have had them on my board of directors as well. It's a very personal decision. Like somebody on their board of directors might not need a psychologist, for example, right? So one also needs to look at themselves and what they're feeling like they're like is missing from the support in their life and put on that board.
I had one guest say that they had some similar to the board of directors. They had a group that they used to always talk to and have, let's say, like speaking events. And someone called him out publicly at a speaking event and completely crushed his ego
Hmm.
around because he would only talk about all the positive things in his life, but not the hardships and struggles he'd gone through. And the person called out and said, like, how dare you hide all the hardships and struggles that you have overcome that could help so many other people while you're out here sharing all of your accomplishments. And and straight up, he was taken aback because if he hadn't done the work beforehand, he could have stonewalled, he could have got defensive, he could have retaliated, he could have like completely crashed out. But he was taken aback, but then he reflected on it and was like, the hardships he had overcome, all the struggles he had overcome, he had downplayed and dismissed
Mhm.
because he had put himself into all of these accomplishments and more positive things instead. So that's where I feel like this guy was like an uninvited member to the board of directors for him, or maybe was
Yes.
on the board of directors but shadowing in the background that he didn't realize. But that was a pivotal person for him to say, "Oh, I need to be more open about my hardships as well, so that other people can understand what I'm going through, and if they're going through something similar." That could be positive, that could be motivation for them to help them work through whatever they're going through also.
So that's a really interesting one because it's somebody on your board who helps you see things differently,
Mhm.
right? And who points out how you can be doing things a bit differently to help others. I like that.
I'm sorry, I'm absolutely sweating here. Because the last few episodes recording in Switzerland, I'm just hotboxing in here.
Good.
What was we were talking about the title again, uh, attaching your identity to a job title. When you
Correct.
were transitioning from one career to the next, did you feel that you were still chasing a title? Even when you left, let's say, the boutique retail, did you feel that when you're chasing your next career, did the title matter just as much?
That's a really interesting question, and I don't think I ever really thought about it as a title. I feel like I was thinking about it more as wanting to do more purposeful work, wanting to help other people go through a transition that I had already gone through myself. It was more about the lifestyle that I wanted to live. I feel like my focus was more there. But now that you're asking about a title, I do think a title in a way is important because it's really like if you give somebody your business card, it's the first glance or observation that somebody will have about what you do, right? Who you help, what you dedicate your life to. So in a way, a title is important, but I think at that time, I wasn't focusing so much on that. And also how I would be observed in a new career. It was more about finding purpose and wanting to live a lifestyle that I had been yearning for.
Yes. The reason I bring it up is because y while having a title that's accurate to what you do and aligns to what you do, some people find themselves stuck in the same treadmill of, oh, but I need to put myself in the box of senior director or executive has to be somewhere within the title in order for me to get the validation or the validity or authority I need from the work that I do. So they would say, oh, I'm CEO of XYZ, uh, because that will give them the validation that what they are doing is worth their time or makes them feel validated in what they do. Whereas I could say, like, I'm the whatever milkman, postman, whatever, and still be validated in what I do, that I should not feel triggered or feel insecure by having that job title. Or as you say, if you strip away all the job titles, take away every piece of paper, every certificate I own, and what's left of me at the end of the day. I should still be able to say I'm curious and open to hearing other people's stories and seeing if I can help them in any way. And that should bring me joy. If I find that I'm lacking, then that means that I still have more work to do. And I shouldn't feel afraid if I feel I have more work to do. I feel energized that I still have progress to make. But that's me. That I think that's me after a lot of work. Otherwise, I would have felt, let's say, defensive, or I would try to put up a mask or a facade in some way to say, "Oh, if I'm working through something, I need to sell myself as the expert first, rather than say, "Hey, we're all on this journey together, but we all need a guide to start us from somewhere."
And I think that when it comes to a title, absolutely for me in my luxury retail career, of course there was a lot of emphasis and weight put on the title and where if I'm going to change from one brand to the next, what's my new title? Absolutely. I think it's a very corporate thing. And you said something so important and it made me smile because that's actually an exercise I do with my clients is listing my achievements, right? What have I accomplished in life and my career? And then who am I? Who am I as a person without those achievements? And it's so easy for us to list. We can do it so quickly, all of our achievements. But when we have that question in front of us, who am I without all of that? It takes people a lot longer to make that list. And it just shows how much of our identity gets entangled with achievements.
So if we strip away all of your titles, who is Melissa?
Who is Melissa? Is someone that has grown up between two completely different opposing cultures. A very, I guess, organized American one or Anglo-Saxon one, and another one, a very disorganized Latin American one. And I've learned how to, I guess, flow and embrace two different cultures. I'm someone that people they tell me that they feel comfortable speaking with me. They're able to open up and really go deep. I am someone that loves bringing people together from different cultures, from different parts of the world, and to find something that we all have in common. I would start there.
Which ties into your values, right? When you describe who you are, you tie it to your values rather than to your title.
Absolutely. That's a great way of putting it. I'm not sure I thought about it so clearly like that until now, but it makes complete sense.
Because you can strip our titles away, but you can't strip away our values. because it's only when we're living out of alignment with our values that we don't feel like ourselves. But if we live into our values, that's when we feel like us. But a lot of people don't know their values. They don't take the time to reflect on what their values are. So they're living by other people's expectations because they haven't put the time into what they truly appreciate. So that's why I love how you describe yourself, because you didn't go straight to title, as we said, you're stripping away the title, stripping away all that was, let's say, handed down to us or given to us, and names, titles, identities, and it's what you find brings light into what you do.
Yes. And you said something so important there because I was thinking about we're born who we are. And when I look back at my interests as a child, before I was, I guess, influenced by outside circumstances or outside circumstances, I look back at things that interested me back then, a lot about spirituality, the universe. I had a lot of those interests. And then I put them aside and I lived a life more in line with society, which was parents' expectations. My parents were always, well, you graduate from high school, you go directly to college. That's just the way it is. My dad was about master's degrees and PhDs. And we allow society and what our community expects from us to influence us. And we leave the authentic side of us behind. And when I was thinking about my second chapter, I was saying to myself, okay, if I went back to college, what would I study? Because I love it, not because it's a moneymaker. And at that point, my answer was world religions, which turned out to be spirituality, and psychology, which turned out to be transpersonal psychology. So it stems back to my interest as a child when I was thinking about I would go directly into the New Age section and look at spiritual things and astronomy and all that, astrology when I was a child. I work now with soul. I mix strategy. I have my MBA. I'm a businesswoman. Understand the importance of being strategic and planning and getting your financial foundations together in a strategic exit plan from your career into the next chapter. But I also bring in soul. So what is soul? It's that inner work. It's who you authentically were before society told you who you should be. It's everything we're talking about, the core values, your definition of success. So I merge those both. So I do bring a bit of who I was as a child and mix it with what I'm doing in my second chapter.
What is your definition of success?
My definition of success, again, is living in accordance with my values, being the true person that I am and not what somebody wants me to be, and also living in accordance with a lifestyle that fills my heart and my soul and making a difference. If I can use the rest of my life to help at least one other person live their authentic selves and their own purpose, then I consider that a success.
And if you had to step away from coaching and psychology, how else would you be able to show up um, to live, let's say, within your definitions of success? Have you ever, let's say, looked at different avenues that if I could no longer coach and if I could no longer, let's say, coaching became illegal tomorrow and we could,
Mhm.
and the whole practice could no longer be allowed. Have you looked at other avenues where you could still show up for others aligned with your values and live according to your definition of success?
The what's coming up for me, because I haven't put thought into this question, right? Especially the way you frame it. I'm hearing the words community work. So it must be working alongside with others to work towards a common goal or a certain outcome, right? That's what's coming up for me right now. But I also have heard that a lot of people have trouble finding their purpose, right? I want to do something else. I want to do something meaningful, but I don't know what it is. And what I tell, like the advice that I give others at that moment is, first of all, if you're not sure what your purpose is, just work on yourself. Work on your mind, body, and spirit. Because as you work on yourself, your authentic self is going to come up and you're going to find what really fills your heart and soul and what makes you excited. That's part of your purpose. And also, I think that we can even think of something as simple as being there for someone else or giving somebody a smile in a moment where they really need it as life-changing. It doesn't have to be this huge, big purpose or this big transformation that you need to live through. There's times in my life where I remember at least two circumstances, more when I was young, maybe one when I was 16 and another when I was 20, where I was in need of a smile. And two people gave that to me, two people I don't know that well. And I remember the feeling that I had in that moment when I received a simple smile. And I can't tell you, like, it's one of the most meaningful parts, times of my life was receiving that smile. And those two people have absolutely no idea the effect that they had on me that day. They don't know until this day. More because I haven't shared it with them because the opportunity hasn't arisen. They're more acquaintances that I see around the city, right? But they're not friends. So you never know the effect that you can have on somebody else's life in that moment. And that's purpose as well.
I love that. And it wasn't meant to be, let's say, a curveball question or anything or to catch you on the spot, but it's something that, and I do like your answer, community work was the first thing that came up because that's
Hmm.
where I feel a lot of coaches, that when you're on that growth journey, especially after burnout, rediscovering yourself, the pattern that everyone seems to follow, or a lot of people seem to follow, is that they want to show contribution. The next step in their growth journey is contributing to others. And that's where a lot of people who pursue joy and happiness, that's the secret to enjoying life, is by showing contribution, either voluntary contribution to others, or as you said, someone who might not be directly in your circle or in your network, but somewhere on the outside, as you said, something as simple as a smile can brighten up someone's day or completely change their trajectory. And so, however we show up on a day-to-day basis, that can influence others in ways that we will either never comprehend or never know.
Absolutely. And that's part of the like this invisible web of life. The changes that we're making in other people's lives that we'll never know about. It's like this invisible thread, this invisible web. For me, there's a greater purpose than even what any of us know living this life.
Going back again to, let's say, your boutique experience, does that still play a part in your day-to-day life now? Because that was, let's say, a big part of 20 years of your life. But are there elements of that you still enjoy, even though, let's say, you're no longer pursuing a career in it, that it wasn't that you took a step back and said, that's no longer me? Or are there parts of it that you say, no, these are the parts I enjoy, and these are the parts that I realized were no longer aligned with me? It doesn't mean I escape or run away from all of it. There are still elements that play parts in your day-to-day life.
I love that question because it's very similar to a question I asked myself when I was considering what a pivot would look like and what I would want to do in my next chapter. And that question was, what are some things that I do in my current career that I love and I want to bring forward with me? And what are the ones that I never want to do again? And absolutely, if it weren't for my 20-year luxury retail career, I probably wouldn't be in the profession that I'm in now, in the career that I'm in now. I bring a lot of what I did every day that I loved. For example, networking. I was in Miami, a very international city, a lot of tourists. So I was in front of new people every day. And even though I'm no longer out in public, the amount of networking that I do, I would say is so much, even for me, so much richer. I have the opportunity now and more time to be on calls like this with people worldwide, across the US, Europe, Australia, India, Dubai. And that really enriches my life to hear different perspectives and to work with different people across various cultures. I would say also the way that I listen to people. It's a very big part of the work that I do now. It's the same skill set that I had to use when I was working with someone in luxury retail because they might come in and say, I want this piece of jewelry or I want this handbag, but what's really behind it? What aren't they saying that I, as a salesperson, need to understand in order to serve them better? Because a lot of times people were escaping the life that they have. There was some woman that I worked with that didn't have a good home life. and they were finding refuge in buying something and having someone to listen to them, right? So there's a lot that I bring, the whole business part, the business aspect, because if I'm helping somebody transition from one career to a new one, a lot of that business acumen comes into play. So there's just so much that I have brought forward with me from my 20-year career that I haven't lost. And when I was leaving my career, I did feel a sense of mourning. I was losing my identity. I was losing my tribe because I felt part of a luxury retail network. And I felt that I was leaving that behind. And something that surprised me in this transition was I feel that I'm more involved now in the luxury industry than I've ever been because a lot of people from that industry are now my clients. And that's something that I didn't expect when I was making the transition. So it was a really beautiful surprise.
That's beautiful. Because of your experience, they were probably able to resonate better with you and relate to you as well. So, and given your values, you were able to help them because of your experience, which was probably also very aligned, but also the fact that you could help people in your industry probably helped you even more because you knew exactly what they were going through.
Absolutely. And that's what they tell me. I can hire so many, there's so many different career transition strategists out there, but you understand me. You understand my life. You understand what I'm going through, and that they feel a lot of comfort in that.
There's beauty in that. Uh, Out of curiosity, because I have no experience when it comes to luxury, boutique, or fashion industry, what does the fashion industry mean to you?
Fashion has always been very important in my life, and I'll tell you quickly a story is that I grew up around it. As I mentioned, my dad's from Ecuador. He has three sisters who always had some type of European connection. I mentioned I know you're in Switzerland. One of my aunts and cousins lives exactly where you are right now. And the others they would travel to Europe, to France and to Spain, to go to France and to Italy, go into the workshops, the atelier, and they would purchase to bring certain fashion pieces back to their luxury boutique in Ecuador. At that time, they were the only ones that would bring European fashion to Ecuador. And I grew up in the boutique and I would hide behind the dressing room curtains and peek at the clients. So it's also in my blood. And what fashion means to me, especially when I was growing up, is being able to express a certain identity of who I was. Because I grew up very shy and not very expressive. At that time, I would have never gotten on a podcast and just answered all these questions. But it gave me an opportunity to mix a style to show who I am and for other people to get a sense of the person I was without me having to say the words. So when you ask, what does fashion mean to me? It wasn't just an industry that I worked in, it was very much tied to my identity. And now that I've left, I would say I left my career about 3 years ago. I'm also now exploring fashion and who I am through it because I'm no longer dressing the way I dressed before I entered luxury retail. When I was in luxury retail, I was wearing the brand. So if I worked for Louis Vuitton, I was wearing Louis Vuitton. If I worked for Chanel, I was working for Chanel. So I question, was that me or was that somebody who had to dress up to represent the brand or maybe a mix of both? And now I'm trying to discover who I am and expressing it. I'm on this discovery again of who I'm becoming because I'm still on a journey. I don't have all the answers. And how do I express that through fashion?
That's interesting. Be- Especially when you said that, because fashion is you expressing, it's a form of self-expression. But you said that you felt when you were working for different brands like Louis Vuitton that you would dress Louis Vuitton. But I feel that similar to working with any company, when you wear their logo or their brand because you're working for them, you're doing it because, again, first you have to show respect for the company you're working for, and you're bringing their value as, let's say, you're the medium for them to bring the value through you to the customer. So the difference between, so take for an example, working for an engineering company, I'm going to wear the engineering company's brand.
Mhm.
I'm going to wear their logo when I'm going to a customer or to a client because they don't want to work directly with Eugene. They're purchasing from the engineering company. But
Fantastic.
how I show up is how the customer is going to experience that brand. So my
Yes,
responsibility is that they get confidence and assurance from the brand through how I show up to them. So that reflects on what are my values and my qualities to help them have confidence in the work that I do. So whether I'm working for myself, I'm doing coaching, or whether I'm working for another company, I'm working on their behalf, that does not affect how I express myself. If I'm showing up at my best, it should reflect well on whoever I'm working for or whoever I'm working with. So, and that's where I found the fashion industry. For me, I don't have any background in fashion. Not very fashionable by certain people's standards. Very, very minimalistic, as I like to put it. But um, when you say fashion as a form of self-expression, and let's say, as you said, if you're working for a certain brand, are you not expressing yourself to your fullest? I'm sure that whatever brand you're working for, you would still have your input or your own flair, your own style on how you would show up. And that will probably resonate with different people that say, "Oh, I never considered the brand in that way."
absolutely. Because you take the different pieces that you're wearing or that you can acquire and you mix them in a way that also portrays your own personality, right? Because you'll see like a full look going down a runway. Very rarely does a client wear a full look. Maybe if they're invited to a fashion show and that's the way they want to show up, as you say, with respect toward the brand. But I know clients who might wear a Chanel, like a $15,000 Chanel jacket, and they'll wear it with Zara jeans, right? So people now mix and match. They'll take something expensive and wear it with something that's lower cost. And through that as well, they're expressing their personality.
Yes. And that's the aspect that I love as well. It's more timeless fashion that you have that accessory piece. You would spend a lot on one piece, but you could almost wear it forever with anything. Or this would be your go-to piece for a special occasion. But everything else does not have to be matching. It doesn't have to be the same brand just because it's the brand. That you would have this is my go-to Louis Vuitton or this is my go-to Chanel. That's that was my always my understanding of fashion. Or let's say if I was to ever buy an expensive item of clothing, I would say, well, that's my go-to piece for an occasion. But everything else is going to be very minimalistic so that this will stand out. So that was my,
Yes.
let's say, my form of self-expression
Okay.
of the piece.
Absolutely. There's always something special. And I think it also can bring us comfort. Like you talk about a special piece that you invest in. It's something that when we wear it, it could be very symbolic as piece is important to me. And I wear it on special occasions. And today is a special occasion.
Melissa, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that we cover in this episode?
I feel like we covered quite a lot of ground, Eugene. You had some excellent questions. I mean, I feel like we can just keep on going for another 5 hours.
That's the way I love these conversations. It's just like it's Eugene and Melissa having a coffee, and that's just the way it just flows. But if anyone wants to listen today and they wanted one step going forward, where did they begin? What's one action they could take today? Maybe it's a question, it's a reflection, maybe 5 things they could write down to get them reflect on themselves. Where would they begin in recognizing where they are? I think self-reflection was a big thing that for you, recognizing the signals and knowing when to pivot or when to keep going or should I not? Is it time for me to? I think a lot of people have a fear of quitting, especially if they are in a long-term career. They've attached themselves to their identity. They've attached themselves to, well, I've been working here for 20 years. I don't know how to leave. What would be the first step that you would ask them to take?
Well, as you say, Eugene, give yourself some leeway. Something that we don't do is we don't step back and give ourselves time to listen to ourselves. We're always busy, all of us. We have our careers, we have family responsibilities, we have kids, maybe we have aging parents. There's so much on our plate. What I would suggest is give yourself, if you can't give yourself 5 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, give yourself 1 minute, but start somewhere. Schedule it into your calendar and take it as seriously as you would going to one of your kids' events or going to a business meeting. Block off time for yourself each week in the calendar and just sit with yourself. If you want to go for a walk, go for a walk. If you want to sit in silence and start observing what comes up. Okay. Do you have any thoughts that come to you? If not, what are you feeling in your body? If you're not feeling anything in your body, what are you noticing around you? Don't try to look for any answers, just be and see what comes up and receive it. Because what's going to happen is that as you start giving yourself space, I say we always have the answers inside of us of what we want and need in our lives. We just need to give it space to come up from the unconscious. And as you give yourself this space, you're going to see that a lot of the answers that you're looking for are just going to come to you. And they might come to you. Maybe they're not going to come to you in that moment of silence or on that walk. They might come in the most unexpected time, in a conversation with somebody, when you're in the shower, when you're doing a creative project or playing a sport. You're going to get an aha moment. So just start following those signs and symbols and aha moments, and it will bring you to the next step and the next step and the next step in your path.
I love that. Again, especially coming back to giving yourself some leeway, would for me was hard to acknowledge or to grasp when I was first going through burnout. That I had to give myself space. I was like, no, I don't do that. I don't give myself space. I don't take time off work. That's not me. And those were big realizations that I had to sit back and just be like, just you have to sit with yourself. Why am I so uncomfortable sitting in silence with myself for a minute? For 5 minutes. Why is this so difficult? It's because we try to fill up our lives with so much noise because that's more comfortable. It can keep on stimulating ourselves in some way, to keep on worrying because to sit back in silence and actually reflect on what we're doing is very uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I think that's why a lot of us are always keeping busy from the moment we wake up until the moment we go to sleep, because we just want, we don't want to maybe ask ourselves certain questions and hear what the answer is. But that's where growth comes from.
Melissa, thank you so much. We covered so much on the hour, and for people who want to get in touch with you, it's thestellarsoul.com.
Yes, the name of my company, thestellarsoul.com, and I would love to invite you to take a free quiz that I have if you're thinking about going into a different career. I have a quiz. It's called What is Your Career Path Archetype? And it will start giving you some insights into what you can do next that really resonates with the person that you are.
That's great, Melissa. Thank you so much.
My absolute pleasure in being here, Eugene. I really enjoyed this conversation, and thanks so much for the invitation.